201, call the public rules hearing for the Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District to order. Have an agenda. I didn't see one specifically here.
It was the only thing we had was first to take any type of public comment. We haven't received any.
Okay.
Recently, we had, I think Kathy Goss spoke on it at the last meeting, her thoughts.
So does anybody from the public here wish to speak on the suggested revisions of the district rules today? Hearing none. Close the.
You want me to
Yeah,
all go
that's
through it or wait till?
We can wait to the regular board
Yeah,
meeting,
I
and then
think
you can
so.
provide the item and then we can go over that.
Absolutely.
We'll close the public hearing. Move into our regular board meeting. Call the meeting to order. First thing will be pledge of allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have all quorum present, with Gary Meckler being absent. Next item will be public comment on non-agenda items. Anybody wish to speak on non-agenda items? Seeing none. Next item will be public comment on agenda items. Anybody wish to speak on agenda items today?
We've received none.
All right. We are going to, instead of going in order, the board, first item will be for us to go into executive session. We're going to skip down to item number 8 and go into executive session. So under Texas Government Code 551071, to receive attorney-client privilege information regarding 1, pending transport permit applications for groundwater from the Simsboro Aquifer. 2, pending contested permit applications for groundwater from the Simsboro Aquifer. 3, pending writ of mandamus filed by Texas A&M University System in Brazos County District Court, clause number 24-002626-CV-472. Pending lawsuit, Fazino Investments LP versus Brazos Valley Groundwater Conservation District, case number 625-CV-00001, filed in the United States District Court for the Western District of Texas. At this time, the board will go in executive session. Out of 424, board is coming out of executive session. Next, we'll do item number 4, presentation by Mark Nichols and Dr. Joe Yelderman, providing the board a final report of results related to the Brazos River Alluvium Aquifer Groundwater Surface Water Interaction Study, sponsored by the Brazos Valley GCD and conducted by Baylor University.
There's Mark right there. Y'all have seen him before many times.
Hello, thank you. I'll be working through my master's thesis and the data that we collected for that and give you some conclusion. So as we talked about before, the purpose and the motivation for this study was really just looking at how the river and the aquifer interact. They're both important resources, and understanding that interaction is important for managing it prudently and with good information. And it's a really heterogeneous and complex system, and so we wanted to have good information for y'all for that. Some of the questions we looked at were the impact of pumping, the impact of high and low river stage, and some chemical differences between the river and the alluvium. So we're looking at the Brazos River Alluvium Aquifer in the 4 counties. We're calling it the middle segment. The aquifer is quaternary. It has a bunch of different sediments, and we'll talk about that heterogeneous nature and compartmentalization with the results of this. The first of the 2 study sites that I'll talk about were the most complete, and the most complete was Bryan. And this is right where Highway 21 crosses across the alluvium. And we looked at 2 wells, one green and one red, the green one being closer to the river and the red one being further away from the river. And I'll present data on those wells here on the second site that has a little bit less data is near Hearn, where 45 crosses the Brazos River. Again, with the green well being slightly closer to the river and the red well being further away. I'll point out, sorry, I didn't point that on the last one. The hexagon is the USGS river gauge station that gives us elevation data on the river. And then we put data loggers in each of those wells to look at the groundwater elevation in the well. We'll work through a bunch of historical data that isn't in this presentation, mostly to guide our analysis. We use data as well from the conservation districts on both sides of the river, and then the U.S. Geological National Water Information Service. And that's those river gauges that we looked at, both historical and throughout our study site for our river stage. We did a couple of sampling trips, and I can talk about that if you have any questions. I don't have any of the chemical information in this presentation because it hasn't changed since I talked to y'all last. But we sampled for ionic and isotopic chemistry, as well as some field measurements. We did similar work with groundwater sampling, taking ionic and isotopic chemistries and doing manual measurements of the water level. And now we're getting to the results where I'll spend most of my time. So first, I do want to touch on the historical data in Bryan. So this is with wells a little bit further into the aquifer than my study, looking at historical data. And you've seen this plot before, and so I'll just remind you that we're looking at the stage in the river, so the elevation of water in the river throughout time as the blue line. And then there's green dots and red dots for the measurements that were taken in those wells, and the lines just connect those data points. And so what we find throughout this period of time is that the highest elevation of water is in the red well, decreasing in the green well, and lowest in the river. And that suggests groundwater flow from the interior of the aquifer out towards the river. And that's that standard gradient that we see most of the time. I'll talk about that as the standard gradient. However, there are some periods of time where the river starts to get a little bit higher. And what happens in those periods is the hydraulic gradient's a little bit different. And so the river comes up higher than the aquifer or the wells, and it reverses the hydrologic gradient or the head gradient in that margin next to the river. And I'll talk a little bit more after I present the rest of the data on exactly how that interaction, how we think it works, but that's the important part for this. And so there's also some questions though with this historical data. We have infrequent measurements. For 2015, it wasn't sampled for about a year. And so we wanted to have a little bit more control. And so that's where our study comes in. We're looking much closer to the edge of the aquifer at this point, with that green well being just a couple hundred feet into the aquifer, and the red well being about 1,000 feet to the aquifer. This is a similar graph with the blue being the river and the green being the closer well and the red being the further away well. I'm going to zoom into that first section, section A, and talk about that for a second. So in this first segment of time, I'll start with the red well. The red well, which is further into the aquifer, slowly increases and is relatively unbothered by the fluctuations of the river. So it doesn't change much in terms of its hydraulic head. The river has highest magnitude fluctuations of the data that's presented here, which is in response to rain. And those same fluctuations are mimicked in the green well that's close to the river. And so what we're seeing here, what we believe is happening is that there's a bunch of water that was in the aquifer that was trending towards the river and discharging into the river. That's what sustains the river most of the year. But when you get a bunch of rain and it fills up that river channel, it acts as a dam. So it fills up that water, and so the water that would have exited through the river starts getting piled up, and see that response. And we see a little bit of a lag time. So those dotted lines on the left side of that graph are trying to show that the peak discharge in the river, the peak elevation in the river rather, happens about a day before the peak elevation in the well, which kind of strengthens that assumption. And so that's what we think is happening here. And then it returns to a standard gradient, with the red well being the highest and the head gradient suggesting flow from the aquifer to the river, which sustains the river throughout the year. This data we have similar data in Hearn, and I'll present that. Same plot, blue being the river, green being the closer well, red being the well further into the aquifer. I'll zoom into the first section here. Unfortunately, we lost that logger in the second half, but we have it for the first half. And so this is a little bit later. So we missed those big magnitude fluctuations that we had captured in the Bryan data, unfortunately. But what we do see is still a response from the fluctuation in late July, indicated by the dotted lines, with a little bit longer lag time between the river and the aquifer. What exactly that means for hydraulic conductivity or whatever that is a little bit hard to determine, but we are still seeing a connection in a similar manner that we saw in Bryan. And then again, it returns back to this more standard gradient. And again, we lost the red data log range, so it's a little bit less clear at this site. The last thing that y'all haven't seen yet that I want to talk about is we did some work with mini piezometers. And what a mini piezometer is essentially a really small well that's hand driven into the river sediment. And we look at the hydraulic gradient. And so I have this conceptual diagram of a well or a tube stuck into the riverbed. You're looking at the change in head between that point at the bottom of that well and the river. And if it's above the river, that suggests that water's coming from the river sediment into the river and feeding the river. And if it were to be below the level of the river, it would suggest the opposite. And what we saw is a hydraulic gradient that was higher in the riverbank sediments than it was in the river, suggesting flow from the riverbank into the river, which is consistent with our understanding and our data of the aquifer. The limitations here are it's really heterogeneous. So, I can put one here and it hits a sand lens and I move 10 feet that way, I hit a clay lens. And so it's just a couple of points, and we took several. I think we did 5 or 6 in each location. And we got pretty consistently positive gradients. The other thing that makes it hard is that the river is bouncing up and down, by a couple, tenths of an inch, and the head gradient's only a couple of tenths of an inch above the river. So it was fairly consistently above the river. How much it was above the river and what that gradient is quantitatively is very hard to say. So qualitatively, the river was gaining in this period of time, but we can't be too much more confident than that in terms of what that actual head gradient was. One other piece that suggests this as well, that left picture, you see this whole really sloppy side of the riverbank. And when we were driving the mini piezometers into the sediment, you get this it's a very qualitative thing, but it's you see water in the bank and you can kind of feel the water coming up through the sediments. And so that's consistent with our understanding. But again, it's something that's hard to put data to. And we did try seepage meters. They didn't work out very well, so we don't have data for that. And so the biggest thing that we learned from this is in 2 different locations with several different piezometers at each locations, we were able to observe positive head gradients. And there's limitations because of the small gradient, and it makes it very inaccurate and hard to measure. It's subject to the heterogeneity in the bank, different sections of the sediment, and low hydraulic conductivity sediments take a long time to equalize. So you can put it in a clay and wait there for several hours, and you still might not have fully equalized. And so those are some limitations. But in conclusion, what we found in our study, I'm happy to talk about any of this, is that groundwater flows in the alluvium towards the river most of the time. The groundwater in the alluvium flows towards the river, or restart that one. The groundwater in most of the alluvium flows towards the river all of the time. So only the section right around the river is getting these reversals and these changes in fluctuation. Most of the alluvium is always flowing towards the river. Point number 3, certain groundwater characteristics are distinctly different from the water in the Brazos River, whether that be geochemical or mostly geochemically. So that's talking more about the chemical data. Number 4, the interactions between the alluvium and the Brazos River are spatially variable, and they vary with the aquifer sediments throughout the channel, and then in the river with the banks and everything. Lastly, the flow rates and the average linear velocities are very slow. So these things aren't responding on a scale of days or weeks. It takes a long time for it to equalize, and you might see pressure responses, but that doesn't mean that water is moving that fast. And so those are important things to consider. And with that, I'll take any questions. Oh, let me acknowledge Alan. Thank you for all your support. Elena, my other master's student at Baylor, was a huge help, as well as Wayne and Dr. Joe, who I don't see him anymore.
Joe's up there.
Oh, there he is. He moved. And the landowners that helped us get access to their land were so instrumental in this research. So thank you.
I got one quick question.
Yep.
And that is, did you get any feel for what that distance might be from the riverbank inward that you got the reversal and an interaction? Did you get a pretty?
Somewhere between the green well and the red well at Bryan, because the red well wasn't seeing that fluctuation change. So if we see the red well, it kind of stays consistent. So even with this large magnitude fluctuation in the river, you're not seeing that quick. There is a slight positive trend, but it's not a quick pivot like it is in the green well. So somewhere between that 200 and 1,000 feet into the aquifer. In Hearn, further than these two wells, because both of those two wells responded. And that's about as precise as I can be.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. Just, I think that we're seeing pressure responses in some cases, not just flow. And so it's hard to know if there was any movement of where movement of water might have occurred. That's a separate sort of question, but the effect of it is fairly limited when you look at that scale of just even the pressure responses. I mean, like you said, the red well in some cases is not affected if it's far enough away. But from studies, not only here, but in other places in the alluvium, it's not very far from the river. It's pretty close to the river that we see interactions. I would say, hundreds of feet is what I would be thinking.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll also say that in our limited isotopic analysis, we didn't see anything. But in our document, our report, we do talk about that as well. But that would be a suggestion if you wanted to constrain how far the river water might be coming in. Isotopic chemical analysis might be a good way to do that.
Any other questions?
Any other questions from the board?
Been a long day. I'd just like to make a statement for you. I just want to thank you, Alan and the board and so forth. It was a great experience for Mark and his education, and I hope he can get you some good data. But we were very, very pleased with everything that you were able to do for us. And so hopefully we did something well for you too. But I think you should be congratulated for a district that y'all are working hard to manage groundwater.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank y'all. Good job, Mark.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There's Monique. It's out of the way.
Yeah. To item number 5. Presentation by Advanced Groundwater Solutions detailing the average artesian head change for each aquifer, comparison of the average head change for each aquifer, and the compliance with the corresponding desired future condition.
Before we get started, I just want to let everybody understand, we do this annually. This is based on our water level measurement program we've been doing for many, many years now. We have certain DFC wells and other wells. And it's incumbent on us to make sure that everybody in GMA 12, as well as everybody in these two districts, understand that the DFC is a very important thing. It's a regulatory number, and that we stay compliant with that. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to James.
And since the board has been here for quite a while already, and all of you have seen this presentation last year, there's quite a few slides in here that I'm going to move quickly through because you've seen them all before. Last year, there were a couple new members that hadn't seen them and we slowed down. So if you have questions, stop me, but I'm going to move pretty quick. Y'all seen this map before, GMA 12. That's why we're doing DFCs. The DFCs flow into all the regional water planning, the MAGs, and all of that funding. The desired future condition, again, is just that quantitative measure of how you're measuring the aquifer and impacts to the aquifer. It can be water levels, volumes, available drawdown, spring discharge, a lot of different things. So why track the DFCs? Because Chapter 36 basically says that you can be petitioned if you're not tracking and if you're failing to put in place rules to meet and stay in compliance with the DFC. And that's why we're staff and is spending a lot of time out measuring water levels and making sure that we've got good data and are staying compliant and tracking this. We went through this last year with some of the challenges with making sure you've got wells, and you all have heard about all that with the staff's description and Alan's description of some of that. You're pretty familiar with the desired future conditions and how that came about in the last round of planning, and you also are familiar with the fact that you're right in the middle of it again, and Alan's got GMA 12 meetings all the time. So obviously there's the DFC development, which is what we just described that Alan's working on with GMA 12, and then there's the tracking, and that's what we're talking about today. So the tracking methods basically are trying to assess water level averages across the district in each aquifer. We do that two different ways. Arithmetic average, which is basically like averaging all the numbers. And then the second one, which we feel like generally is a more reasonable approach, depending on the distribution of wells, is a spatially weighted average, but we can't do that all the time because we just don't have enough wells across the district. So you'll see both those numbers. And the DFC goals established in the last round of planning are listed here. And when you look at the maps in the next slides, you'll see symbols, and that's where you can come back to this. If you're reading this tonight as you sit in your recliner, you can come back and just look at the legend. Okay, so Sparta, DFC wells, the list of those are here. If you can see the well names on the right map. You can see the water level declines from 2000 to 2025, 25 years. You can see those water level declines posted on by the well throughout the district here. This is just for the Sparta aquifer. And then you can see the arithmetic average was just an average of all those numbers. And then you can see the spatially weighted average where we contour all those numbers and so when you don't have data out here in between the wells, you get a spatial weighting, a correct spatial weighting where you don't have data, similar to what the GAM does, and that's why we do it that way. So your DFC is in 2070 is basically 53 feet. You can see that depending on how you average those numbers, 8 to 12 feet. So in compliance, and after 25 years, I won't go into great detail here. This is just talking about the spatial weighting and the kriging that we do, and some of the data that has to be used to contour the data with the kriging package.
And let me quickly say this, so that everybody remember on our curtailment plan, that we have 3 triggering levels. First triggering level is 65% of the DFC, whichever aquifer, doesn't matter, 65. Trigger level 2 is 80%. Trigger level 3 is 90%. 90% is where actual curtailment occurs. But the other 2 levels, there's a lot of things that you can do, okay? So in that last case, it's less than 25% of the DFC. Even if you use the arithmetic, you haven't even reached 25% of the DFC, and you've burned through more than 33% of the time, the 2000 to 2070. You've already gone through 25 years. You've used less than 25%. So keep that in mind as we go through. Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
And if you want to see the hydrographs that's based on, generally, as Alan was just describing, slight declines, and then most of the wells popped up in the last couple of years, but you do see some that are moving down, just a mix. And moving on to Queen City, just a couple of wells there, and we just do the average decline there, 44. That's the DFC. If we look at the average, then hold on. Did I misread that? Average artesian 44 feet of decline. Okay, so that's the DFC, and you can see the numbers.
And it's about 1 foot is what we've had.
Yeah.
From what I saw.
Yeah. So Carrizo, let me stop for a second. Chris Draybeck does has done all this work. So he wasn't here today to present, so I'm presenting. But he's the one who's been doing this for years, does a great job. And I'm sort of presenting his good work here today. So if we look at the Carrizo, then essentially you've got 14 foot of decline, 13 foot. If you spatially weight those, and you can see the distribution of those there. And again, you've got low percentages, 13 feet of 84 in the time frame. Carrizo observation well, Calvert Bluff, just 2 wells there. You can see that. Pretty steady. All right, Simsboro, here we go. So there's all your Simsboro DFC wells. You can see them across the county, and you're at 68 feet arithmetic average, 70 or 80 feet of decline, depending on how far down dip you go in your calculations. And I'll show you another slide here in just a second. So you're, say 70 feet into 262. And I haven't done the math on that.
Well, but I'll say last year, we've been on the last 3 years, but the last 2, it got pretty steep. We were moving 14 feet one year, 8 feet another year. We admitted a year ago, we're at 66, we're at 68. So things, because of last summer, things really slowed that down. And I believe, you can weigh in on this. I think we're finally seeing a leveling out of that effect that we're having from this erosion.
Yeah, we'll show you that in just a second, but that's exactly right. And so that 70 or 80 foot average depends on where, if you stop at basically kind of TWDB down dip extent, or if you contour all the way through the county. And so that's where the 70 or 80 foot comes from. Less if you use the extent of the aquifer defined by TW and 3000 TDS. So what those observation wells look like, and you can see this is Robertson County, and you can see the decline that Alan was talking about, kind of steepening there in the last couple of years with drought, or 2 or 3 years ago. And then here's Brazos County. Some of those, again, pretty steep as of 2 or 3 years ago, and then kind of not as steep recently. Here's Hooper, mostly up there on the north end of the district. And again, 22 feet of 167 foot DFC. Hooper well hydrographs. Yeawood Jackson. And again, 7 feet of 67 feet.
As I said, the increase is a gaining.
Yeah.
Gaining.
Oh, I'm sorry, increase. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. And you can see that increase here in some of these wells. Some of them are pretty flat, and then some of them are popping up. Okay, so here's what Alan was talking about here, comparison of DFCs over the last 7 years. And so if you look at Simsboro, you see kind of a big jump here from 43 to 58, 66, but now kind of leveling off. And if you look at that delta over time, that in 2023 it dropped 15 feet, and then 8 in 24, and now we're back down to 2 feet as some of those water levels relax. And even though the hydrographs are still going down, when you do the averaging, I'm trying to get to that. Okay, here's Brazos. We got pretty steep here, and that's where we saw those bigger changes throughout that year. And there's just a slight shift here. And when you take that and contour it across, then it makes a bigger difference when you're spatially averaging those.
And something to note, if we went back, we keep this graph of what it looks like over time. And we really started picking it up in 2015. And for the first few years, up until we got to 2020, we were dropping about 2 feet. So we're back this year to where we were between 2015 and 2020 2020 probably, which is a very positive thing. But,
The rate of change has slowed a little bit,
it has.
which is good. And then Bradley's River alluvium, the well there, and then you've got hydrographs. And that's Robertson County, Brazos County. And then if you look across the years, in 2021, you had 68% average saturation, 69, 63, 64, 64 in 2025. And so your DFCs are stated here, north of 21, you've got your DFC of 30%, south it's more than 40%. So sitting fairly stable and quite a bit above the DFC. So rate of artesian change, as we said, has slowed in the Simsboro. And so obviously district staff's working hard trying to find more monitoring wells. And any questions?
Any questions from the board?
We are in compliance.
Well, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going to item number 6, discussion and possible action on matters involving the planning and setting of desired future conditions for each of the managed officers.
Or do you want to go back to one?
Well, I thought maybe we'd do that.
Okay,
Just
go
did
ahead.
the desired future conditions, and that was kind of fresh on our mind.
All right, okay, so we are, and we really don't have any action on this, but you can read through, it's pretty much a rendition of what you got last month on where we are at GMA 12. Going over to page 2 is starting about half page saying other matters continue to need to be decided. You saw James and Chris created the pumping scenario, the bridge scenario. Y'all saw that last time. We're going to go ahead and present that again now over at GMA 12 just for informational purposes. Just because they brought it up, we've done it. We'd like you to see what you said and what we think that response will look like. Our next meeting is on June the 27th. So we're on that agenda. I think that we talked about this some last time about the expression of our DFCs. And, it'd kind of been an either or an or. It had been, well, are we going to do average artesian reduction percent remaining? Which one are we going to do? And at GMA 12, it was brought up the last meeting that, we might just do both, which is the way I wanted to approach it as far as any reports that we might have, that kind of thing. And I'm certainly leaning toward, and we got time to discuss it more, but I'm leaning toward that we do both. We say, okay, Jason and I were having a conversation, especially in the down dip end of this, and y'all had us to look at, and we did, and James and Chris did, is how deep can you set a pump in the deepest part of the, with the artesian head and still have 100 feet of water over the pump? Where is that? And it's important that I believe that we know from that level, it's not from the top of the aquifer, it's from that actual pumping level that you can sustain at 100 feet above the pump. How much artesian head do you have left? What is the percent you have left? So I'm going to suggest to you as we move through that we, in the explanatory report, any reports that we create for the district, that we go ahead and express it both ways. We've had, just as we are now, we've X amount of artesian head. Here's where we are. We started in year 2000, or we started in year 2010. Here's where we are. And then also, it's very easy from what I'm hearing to then compute, and that is this much artesian reduction remaining. So, yeah.
So based on that 329 or whatever our number was, do we know what that percentage would be?
I do not know that. I don't know.
We calculated that number, I believe, back for the public hearing but we haven't done it this time.
Let me ask you this, that brings a good question. Do you think that percent remaining will be it won't be the same in feet, but do you think that it will be relatively the same in percentage from down dip to up dip? The difference between the pumping level and down there? I don't know. I'm just asking.
No, I think it'll change quite a bit. I mean,
It'll be more down south.
Yeah.
And less to the north. Okay. One thing I believe that has pretty much been decided for us, we talked about whether we were gonna consider going to 2080 or keep 2070 or 2075. Well, HB 2078, when it passed, it says that the executive director, Water Development Board will decide that number based on regional planning. And regional planning is moving theirs up to 2080 for the next state water plan. I spoke with Natalie Blue day before yesterday. I said, tell me what that number is going to be. She said, it's going to be 28. So Robert Bradley at our last meeting had said that we kind of get to choose it. Well, we don't get to. We don't get to do that. So we'll be extending it out 10 years on our for our next
for the DFC.
Okay. So I don't think there's any action to be taken today. Anybody got any questions?
Any other questions for Alan?
All right, you know.
Going back to item number 1, discussion and possible action on the minutes of the May 8th, 2025 permit hearing and regular board meeting.
All right, y'all have the minutes in your packet and you've had them online and you got anything that we need to correct, certainly let us know. If not, I'd ask that you approve these as presented.
Any questions from the board? If not, entertain a motion.
Move approval as presented. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2, financial report for May 2025.
All right, quickly, we have collected all of the fees that were due for 2024. Everyone is paid. Cynthia can probably give me a better update. We had 7 entities as of about a week ago that still lacked paying the 2025 fees. That totaled about $700 and something. I think that number is probably less today. So we're real close on having that done. Our total deposits for the month was just over $112,000. I won't go through the balance sheet, but needless to say, you can look at that and we balance out. And the budget expenditures, we are at, we've collected a total of approaching $575,000. We've spent through May 31 right at $600,000, and we've used 47.5% of what our budget is at this point. And the big items on our pledge security or on our collateralization report, we're at 131 days of weighted average maturity on our CDs. CDs are 74.4% of our portfolio. Cash is at 25.6%. And Prosperity Bank collateralization level is 1,576%. They're still holding those bonds, and we don't have any other than our checking account that's and very little over the 250,000. So and then 118% out here at South Star Bank. The other 2 reports, the vendor report, and is there in your packet. And with that, I'd entertain any questions.
Any questions for Alan? If not, entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve the financials as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, discussion and possible action on draft rule amendments, including but not limited to requiring the installation of well seals that provide access to obtain water level measurements and registration of wells prior to service work being performed.
So, we went over these, 2 rule suggested wording at the last board meeting. You've had this has been out posted for 20 days online, has been sent out to our distribution list for any types of comments. We've not received any comments, other than what I believe Kathy, Goss made a comment in and was favorable to this at the last board meeting. These 2 rules simply are giving us as you can see, the water level measurements have become an extremely important thing in managing these aquifers. And we're running into more and more times where we can't get into the well seal to get a water level measurement. So what these 2 rules are doing is just simply requiring when you've got a new well, that the well drillers have got to put in a well seal that gives us a 1/2-inch port on the top of the well seal, which allows us to get access to the water level. That's 12.3.5. 12.3.6 basically is if a well driller or a well service company is called to come out and work on someone's well, and number 1, the well needs to have been registered with the district in order for them to go do that. And that's a simple phone call by the well driller to say, hey, are they registered? Simply picks up the phone, Megan, me, whomever, and says, we don't have them on the map. We immediately register whoever it is, so that they're in our system and they can go out and work on the well. The one thing then we're requiring is that they install a well seal that will allow for measurement of the water level, no different than we have in a new well. That's the uptake on those 2. Anybody have any questions on either one of those?
Any questions or concerns from the board on the rule changes?
That's any well, not, it's either commercial or private or whatever.
That's correct. Yeah. And if any other questions? Not, I'd ask that you adopt the rules 12.3.5 and 12.3.6 as presented.
Entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the rule changes as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item number 7, review, discussion, and possible action on the readoption of the district investment policy.
All right, in the front pocket, I sent these out to you. In the very front pocket of your booklet is a copy of the current district investment policy. Chris, I sent these out and I asked for the Budget and Finance Committee members to give me some feedback. There was nothing that was done during this legislative session that would require a change to any of the investment policy. I'm suggesting that you readopt it as we have it. And also I have Chris was able to get back to me and Lisa and both on the budget committee, and we saw the same thing, that they would recommend that we readopt as they currently are with no revision. So anybody see anything, any questions, any suggestions? Now'd be the time.
Any
Not,
questions on investment policy from the board?
if not, I'll ask that you readopt the rules the district investment policy as current, as presented.
Entertain a motion.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10, update on legislative matters occurring during the 89th legislative session affecting groundwater districts.
I'm gonna leave that one for y'all to read through. The one that did affect us was 2078. It did, I went and testified, to oppose 2078, not the entire bill, but there was that one segment that at the very end, it says that we're gonna have DFCs that we're going to adopt, and then we're gonna have adopted interim values, not to exceed 10 years. And I explained to the Senate Natural Resources that was going to be coming. I actually went and was with Senator Perry for 30 minutes in his office and explained to him that these were going to turn into triggers. My opinion, they're going to turn into triggers, and it's going to cause districts to be challenged because we may or may not be at a particular above possibly a 10-year value. And so needless to say, it did pass as is. So we will live with that, and we will we'll go through the DFC process.
So also on that, say we adopt numbers every 10 years out based on the modeling or whatever. And say 20 years, we're below where we want to be as far as we've exceeded it. Do we have to provide a report or anything at that point in time?
It
or-
doesn't say that at all. They say that these are specifically for the district's monitoring of where they are on their glide path, like we're not already doing that.
But the Water Development Board is not requiring a report from us on how we're going to course correct.
Not now,
Okay,
not now.
get foot in the door and build on it later.
So we'll see. We'll see how that all goes. But we kind of got a plan to work. There's, we'll see how it works because we're going to have to do it this round. So it's coming pretty quickly.
Anything else on this?
That's all I got. I mean, I would read through and you can see what has been adopted. So I don't think there's really anything particularly.
Any questions from the board on the island on anything related to the legislative session? All right, moving on to item number 11, General Manager's report.
Okay, I'm gonna skip through since it's in your book as far as the maps are concerned. We had no 1-year permits that were issued. And you always have the total permitted wells and production from year to year. There is one document in there that I'd like it to pay some attention to. I went through and looked at the total number of water level measurements that we've taken. John has taken probably 90% of these in 2025. So we're 5 months into the year. We've already taken nearly 500 water level measurements. And most of those are manually taken. We do have some continuous measurements, but most of them are getting to a well and actually measuring the well. You can see the breakdown that we have on there. I broke it out in 2 categories. The one on the right are those monitoring wells that we literally are measuring 3 or 4 times a year. We've done, there's 290 measurements there, total of 487. The reason I'm wanting you to know that is because when you go down, further down to where it says Central Water Level Measurements, we do have that subset of, I think it's about 70 wells, okay? And it's centered right out here from the middle of Goodland and then going out basically 5 to 7 miles. And it's where we saw that unique, I'll put it unique drawdown that we saw in 22 because of the drought and the amount of pumping that we had. And in 23, it wasn't quite as much. We're measuring this year, we'll probably measure those water levels. So far, we've measured them, I think, 2 extra times. if and when the pumping starts in the Simsboro, and it hasn't this year, it hadn't been any pumping in the month, hadn't had to, it's raining, okay? There hadn't been any extra pumping in Hearn or Calvert, okay? So it's not as critical that we're just out there measuring every week. If we get into another drought, we get into another 2022, we're gonna be out there once a week, once every 2 weeks. It may be, we alternate through, but the more data we get, the better. And we're really focused on that. So I wanted y'all to have a good feel for what it is that John's doing out in the field and what we're getting good water level measurements. And I think James would agree that the more data we can get, the more locally we can fine tune what the effect's gonna look like.
Right.
Rest of it is standard.
All right.
All I got. Anybody got any questions?
Any questions for Alan on the general manager's report? Do you have any discussion and or possible future agenda items?
We've got one at some point, no, not whenever it might be. I got the auditor is scheduled to come in next week, 2 weeks. And so there'll be an audit report in the not too distant future.
Need to go back into executive session, Monique?
Yes.
All right. At this time, before we adjourn, the board will go back into executive
Okay.
at 5:13. You good?
Yes,
It is 5:34. Coming out of executive session. We have nothing to discuss.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.